So this is the, for those joining online, this is the Town of Fairfield Economic Development Commission meeting. Our regular meeting of Thursday, October 5th. We're meeting in the Old Town Hall conference room as well as via Zoom. It's 8:32. With that, I'll turn things over to the chair to call the meeting to order. Thank you. Provide this welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. So very good. All right. So good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Let's just kind of get right to it. Can we have a motion to accept the minutes as read?
I propose you accept the minutes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Good. All right. Excellent. So that's moving forward. I'm actually just going to jump right back to Mark. I want to kind of move things along today a little bit, if you can. All right. To take away from anyone, but if we do that, that would be great.
Yeah, we have a couple things to talk about. One is, as you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission has drafted a new plan of conservation development. I sent out kind of an overview of what the POCD, the master plan, is all about. Some background in terms of the other work that's been undertaken and some of the key policy recommendations. I was saying to Ken before we started the meeting, the POCD Plan of Conservation Development is organized a bit differently than previous versions, which was more neighborhood. The last one was more neighborhood oriented. Before that, takes different formats, but this one's organized around a couple different value statements that tie into what's been done here in terms of the strategic planning effort. But I wanted to focus on the policy recommendations that pertain to economic development. As I know, Planning and Zoning Commission, several commissioners had asked, if this has been widely disseminated amongst various boards and commissions for their review and comment. And they're certainly inviting feedback from commissions like EPC as to before they take action on the Plan of Conservation Development draft. So I did call out, and this is just carved from the Plan of Conservation Development draft. I don't know if I put on a link a couple times today to the document like this. But there are a number of recommendations, mostly under the Sustainably Prosperous Community section. And I wanted to go through those and make sure that one, we were on board or comfortable with those, make sure that, other areas of the plan address some of the other key concerns. And I did note, some prior conversations we had on zoning regulation, land use policy, where the POCD, didn't address them directly. Doesn't address those issues directly. Some of the things we talked about in the past. So I don't want to I don't read this, I sent it out, but I don't know if there was any questions regarding, the first grouping, which is those policy recommendations under Sustainable Prosperous Community, starting with transit-oriented development, which is consistent with the 2019 plan, which this commission endorsed and the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted back in 2019. Discussion about extending the Center Design Business District to include the former Exide battery site, so taking it along the Color Road to the Mill River, which would provide stronger design consideration. The Center Design Business District has a whole design template that requires development applications to be consistent with, and what you see in the downtown in terms of moving those commercial buildings, so there's not parking in front, parking behind, that type of thing. There is something we haven't really talked about, but I gathered there's some conversation with TP&Z staff about providing more opportunities to expand our home-based business regulations to allow for professional office use on a first floor in owner-occupied housing, particularly on some of our commercial corridors, Black Rock Turnpike, the Tunxus Hill Cutoff area, you'll note and you're familiar with it very well, there's some residential properties there. There's been some interest from professional uses like accountants and attorneys to use the first floor as a commercial use with second floor above as residential. Then there's been conversation about creating a gateway near on Easton Turnpike near the Sacred Heart campus, both to connect the two campuses and provide a neighborhood oriented commercial district there. I think we've talked before about whether we can leverage brownfield funding to support redevelopment of brownfield sites, both on Kings Highway. I think, this is in reference to the old Miller Volkswagen site, which we've looked at, which is also within the Wisconsin River watershed. Some of the changes within the center design business district currently allow 5-story, 50-foot tall buildings. One of the TOD plan recommendations would reduce that to 4 stories, but keep the height basically the same. But again, look at, some mixed use to allow for residential above that. Currently, we have a 50% residential floor area requirement. Obviously, if you're doing a 3 or 4-story building, that doesn't quite work. Also looking at modernizing number of permitted use. We had some conversation here when we met with staff and the consultant about, some communities have allowed for distilleries, craft distilleries or craft breweries. We talked about experiential retail, more flexibility to allow owners of property to flip back and forth between various retail uses and food uses, for example, and that ties into the last recommendation in terms of equalizing some of the parking requirements. Some of the things that were elsewhere in the plan that weren't in that section that we've talked about was flood detention, particularly along the Rooster River watershed, looking at implementing Black Rock Turnpike safety study and post road surface safety studies, implementing some of those to provide greater connectivity and pedestrian improvements, and some of the placemaking initiatives downtown, and as well as at Fairfield Metro to create a better public realm. So those are the things that I found in the plan that we've certainly talked about in the past that have an economic development flair. Wanted to open it up for questions, conversation, see whether the commission was comfortable providing, for the chair's signature, a letter that would indicate support generally for these concepts. And I just wanted to put it forth and see what you guys think. So
I think it's, thoughtful and covers a lot of the things that we are always pushing and advocating for. I always find that there's no one strong, it's a very gentle nudge, this plan. Like,
yes, it is.
It's not exactly an overt thing. There's not like some person like striving these initiatives. So that, having this guidance, I think makes sense for the town and benefits in the long run.
Yeah, it is. It's a very modest incremental approach to things. I don't think that the commission was looking for a dramatic course correction. It seems very consistent with where we've been. Past planning efforts largely incorporated a lot of the recommendations from the Affordable Housing Committee's plan, most recent plan, the TOD plan. And as staff had indicated, it doesn't really affect 95% of the town in terms of most of the residential areas are pretty much left as is. So it's really focused on a couple of key areas, obviously the commercial corridors along the Post Road and Metro, for example, but that's where I think, they're looking for some feedback from this group.
And Kings Highway, I think, is perfect for future development.
I do too, and one of the things they didn't really talk about, but we've talked about it here, and I put down there as well, and maybe we want to reference that, is looking at opportunities to widen the commercial corridor along Kings Highway. Part of that is eliminating some of the split zones, because not just on Kings Highway, but elsewhere, you have properties that fall both in the commercial and then residential areas, and it creates issues in terms of, redeveloping those parcels, conformity with our regulations, and it just seems like that's something that, we should address as we go forward.
Can you give me an example of a property along Kings Road that would have that?
Well, we talked about, one of the things I said something about the, let me see.
It's about the depth of the commercial properties along Kings Highway, especially if you're running from I-95 all the way to North Avenue, Bridgeport location, and the depth of the commercial space isn't deep enough to really develop.
Not Rick Manning, is it? Are we talking about Rick Manning?
No,
Or
like,
it's further. It's
Town for Tire.
Fair Tire. Oh, I got you. Okay, so we're
Right.
talking more about the south side where there's residential development.
Yeah, but you have all that flooding there.
Yeah,
Oh, I understand.
we're really
Okay.
talking about it
Yeah.
from Black Rock Turnpike all the way to the Bridgeport line. There's that section is,
So
and I
this-
think this really misses the mark
Agreed,
tremendously.
It's a lost opportunity.
This may not, those are specific examples in that area, but also, these are illustrations how the zones are drawn in this area of Tungsten's Hill Road, Tungsten's Hill Cutoff. You can see where you have a small neighborhood design business district. And then you have properties that are partially within the neighborhood design business district and also in the residence B district. Strangely enough, the residence B district is actually more permissive than the neighborhood design business district from a height perspective. So you create these, I know this because we've been looking at redeveloping the former town garage at 488 Tungsten Hill Road. We looked at, selling the property at one point to allow for redevelopment. And we really couldn't go up vertically. Not that we were looking for a very tall development, but I think the Residence B district was actually allowed for a higher height than the commercial district fronting the main corridor. So
Isn't that gonna be like Operation Home?
that was, we're proposing now to lease it to Operation Hope, but that's in the process.
Yeah, I mean, that's been idle forever.
Yeah.
There's no.
In conversation forever.
Property next door, or you need to, there's.
Yeah, there's a church.
behind it,
We've been
parking
in
lot.
conversations with the Episcopal Diocese
Yeah.
about, leasing the parking lot behind the church or buying the church property. Because it seems access to their requirements as well, but
Because they sublease it to another church to use as well.
So is that the proposed boundary? on
this
south
is the
side?
existing
The existing,
boundary.
okay,
Yeah,
and you
so,
wanted to move further south.
so either, if I could call up the, if you were looking at Kings Highway, for example, you'll see a very similar, it goes and one solution would be to widen the corridor, would be to eliminate these split zones, just put this all within the commercial district.
So that's Soundview that is paralleling Tungsten Hill,
Right.
and it's lower Sound Hill.
Yeah, either you go, I think you either create, the issue on Kings Highway is it's just so narrow that really,
Yes.
you can't really do a
Yes,
whole lot.
yes.
So that's one thing that wasn't in their plan recommendations that we may want to consider, because I know we've had a lot of conversation about that past. The other one would be, we have neighborhood design business district is a more restrictive zone, both in terms of height and setbacks and things like that, which you probably want in villages like Southport, Stratfield, Greenfield Hill. I'm not sure this, there's no rhyme or reason between this area. Encompasses portions of former SCAP Motors. So a portion of that SCAP Motors is within the neighborhood design business district, and some of it's in the design commercial district.
One of the buildings,
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
primary building.
Yeah, so, I don't know that there's a whole lot of rhyme or reason there for keeping it within neighborhood design versus design commercial. That's something I think the commission should consider. I don't know necessarily adopt, but something they should look at. Thing is, a plan of conservation development is a 10-year planning document. So if you're suggesting that they consider, pursue, or investigate or explore, it's best to put it into that document, so it's something that they could look at for in the course of the next 10 years.
So it's something that we want to.
But one of the things we've run into, from a use perspective is we've had, 454 Tunxes. We've had, dance studios and fitness uses that have looked at space there. And those were not generally permitted within the neighborhood design business districts. We had to actually go through the process of amending our regs to allow for the use. Which then, then you bring into the conversation other village districts that say, well, I don't know if I necessarily want to see that use in Greenfield Hill. So it's just, it creates some complicating factors, and I'm not sure this is the same setup on Tungus Hill as it is in Stratfield or South.
Someone's gonna use it as a wedge to like.
Right. But it's not that we have to necessarily endorse that, it's just something that we would like the commission to look at. Maybe consider that down the road.
And what would be their potential objection?
I don't know that they would have an objection. I just don't think it's high up on their list right now.
So are we considering suggesting that the neighborhood design district be turned into the design commercial?
One of the things would be looking at how I put it, discussing the viability of the neighborhood design district, this district on Tungus Hill cutoff, and considering whether that should be rezoned.
I mean, just.
It could be rezoned as either residential in this area. There's a couple commercial uses up there.
The corners.
Yep, there's a salon, there's a restaurant, there's a daycare facility, so, you don't wanna create non-conforming uses, but
By the way, that restaurant is excellent.
it is very good,
Joanne's table.
Actually, I always thought that section in there would be an interesting area to become like another restaurant zone,
That garage, well, I mean, that would have to be remediated and all that.
Some of the issue is it's almost too small to be self-sustained, as its own element, so it's just, whether it should be folded into something else, or
Right.
maybe expanded.
I mean, I see what you're saying. Okay, so do we want to, as a commission, do we want to suggest that it should be looked at in a different way and make a suggestion about this to,
I agree. I think that makes sense.
yes.
I propose yes, but I propose even expanding the scope. Let's figure out other corridors we wanna do it too. So if we wanna do it here, like there's a lost opportunity here on this corridor, why don't we pick other segments along Kings Highway or Boston Post Road? And wrap that all into one policy of either upzoning, single zoning, lost opportunity zoning, remapping. And then let's be more comprehensive and more larger in scope. That's what I would love to do.
More of a cure than the Band-Aid.
Yeah.
And, put everything we
All
think
at
is a
once.
lost opportunity for a zoning policy or land use policy failure and put it on the table as it relates to commercial.
The two areas that I think that we've obviously talked about this area today, but in the past, we've talked about the Kings Highway corridor. So those would be areas that I think you could argue. And there is actually within the plan commentary that there's really not, they don't view opportunities for upzoning or zoning to rezone for commercial, adding to the commercial inventory. So it's kind of in contravention to what they're currently talking about. They don't see it. So I think it is, to your point, something we should put back on the table and say, we should think you should take a better look at this.
Because there are parts of say Kings Highway, parallel in Kings Highway, just north of it is Castle, right?
Yeah.
And so on Castle, there are a fair amount of spaces that have, they go commercial all the way to Castle, but then it doubles back and then has some residential as well. So there too, it might be one of the situations where maybe you create that, maybe you create a buffer of the design, maybe a strip of design, neighborhood design that then initiates that could go commercial, design commercial. Maybe that's, part of what I would imagine that zoning will be looking for is some kind of out for you know, for neighbors, to say, okay, well, there's some kind of
Would do.
barrier.
Having dual zoning doesn't help anyone though. You're sort of like in limbo. it
You're
seems
right.
like.
Yeah.
So it should
What
be,
what
get
is
a-
what is the barrier then? How do you create a barrier? How do you, I mean, because they have to have, you know, basically they have to have a hook to hang their hat on when they have the neighborhood show up and try and beat them down.
I think splitting the property makes no sense.
Okay, I'm just throwing stuff out.
You talk about the split zoning?
Yeah.
I kind of understand both parts of it, but it is allows the market to dictate what the best use of the land is. Sometimes it's residential, sometimes it's commercial. But if we have, our goal is to increase the commercial rent list. We gotta either do it or don't do it, right? It has to be one, I think one or the other. And if you make it commercial because that's its highest and best used and the best place to put a commercial property or make sure it's only commercial, then we should stick to it. And, it takes 10 years for the first building really to hit the ground once something is rezoned. So, we're looking at a 10, 20, 30-year plan. Eventually, it's gonna change. Not gonna be overnight, but it's eventually gonna be changed. So I see, advantages of single zoning as part of our policy to increase the commercial grand list.
Well, in some ways, the staff even acknowledged that it was a little bit of, maybe not more of an oversight or just being a little bit less precise in terms of drawing the boundaries when those boundaries were first established. So I'm not sure it was intentional to give people the flexibility of going either or. I think it was more that they just drew a straight line across and they didn't follow the lot lines.
Right.
And to me, it does create issues in terms of confusion both amongst the property owner and even the staff and commission in terms of how to deal with those appropriately. I mean, you could argue that it does provide some flexibility, but to our other argument, which is maybe creating a wider commercial corridor, eliminating those would allow for it to be within that corridor.
That's right.
So I just want to we're comfortable with the broad, these are, again, very high level policy recommendations, which is typical of master plan. But we're comfortable with recommendations that are currently in the plan in terms of land use policy as relates to economic development, as outlined. And then we're thinking about just adding a couple other items. I don't know if there was anything else that I may have missed, but I went back and looked at our past discussions about this and when we met with staff and with the consultant. And I captured a few, I thought I captured all of what we talked about. And I think they did a good job of largely reflecting what we've talked about in terms of what's in the plan. But there were a couple of things that we can strengthen a little bit more. So, and I know the Kings Highway one in particular, we've talked about.
Right. Kings Highway all the way to the railroad tracks.
Well, we could write it in a way that, we're looking at, because there really is, the commercial corridors are along the post road and then along Black Rock Turnpike for the most part. That's where most of our commercial property is.
So if you had a property owner, a commercial property owner, that they needed some extra land to further develop or better develop, and they were able to procure the properties around them, maybe there's some type of addendum that might suggest that if they are in a commercial zone, the primary properties in the commercial zone, and it's directly connected and the part of the ownership from the commercial zone property owner, that he would have a right, more of a right or a suggested right to be able to extend the commercial.
Well, that's why I think it's probably a good thing for the commission, if it feels strongly about this, to put it as a recommendation to be in the plan, because then it would support an applicant's future application to rezone a piece of property if it was consistent with the plan's recommendations. That's, one of the things the commission has to look at when it decides applications that are kind of outside the norm, especially on a zone change. Application is its consistency with the overall land use policies of the town. So
Right.
to have some language that
Right.
provides a little bit more flexibility for them to consider that on a case by case basis would
Yeah.
be helpful.
Because I think if, to your point, by doing a whole policy change, I think it will draw the anger of numerous people and get beaten down immediately, as opposed to having it, if it's out there in a piecemeal manner, it's less likely that you're gonna have a deluge of people coming and being negative on it. I'm just.
Well, they'd have to still look at the
Right,
application.
but
of
it's
the-
also much more challengeable, like, if someone wants to acquire a residential property around them for the sake of expanding their commercial business, I think it becomes much more challenging for the town to defend itself.
Yeah.
If you are, if it becomes as of right, the town, it's defensible. And, no one's gonna like everything. You just gotta come to the conclusion, no one's gonna like everything. I think, an entire text change, for commercial property, becomes defensible to a town.
Your
You know,
point,
that-
though, this is not an overnight thing. I mean, if it was done today, the effects would take years and years, so.
But we do need.
Kind of points to
Yeah.
the general direction
But
that
we
we'd like
put
to go.
something in writing
Yeah.
and give it back to them, that's, I think, where I'm going, with it. We need to come up with something.
I mean, if you're comfortable with the recommendations, the policy recommendations, both in the plans and those that I pointed out at the bottom, if that's reflective of the majority of Richard's thoughts here, then we'll put together a letter to that effect, and probably just suggest you authorize the chair to submit a letter to the TP&Z.
Is that a motion to vote?
I'm okay with that.
But, I'm sorry, is that only as it relates to?
No, I would like to, I
It
think
can
if,
include every-
I think if you're comfortable with the policy recommendations in the plan. We should say that we support them. And then, in addition, those that we feel that they may have omitted that they should consider, we should call out. And
Yeah.
so if you're okay with that, I will largely take this
Yes.
information and put it in the form of a letter saying, we're supportive of these and we think you should look at these additional policy recommendations. And that's what I would propose.
I think that, yeah. Motion to vote
Yeah.
then.
Yeah. Second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Well, Matt, anything from your end? I don't wanna, those joining online, just wanna make sure we give.
Muted, I don't know if you noticed, he's muted.
Okay.
How quickly do you have to get those policy recommendations in?
Well, I really don't, they got into a whole the planning and zoning commission got into a whole conversation about, process and whether we're rushing to complete this in a certain time frame. And I think the only thing that was, the observation was made. We have an election coming up in November. Some of you may choose not to run for reelection. This is something the commission would like to complete before your term is up. Let's take action. But, we have been working on this for 3 or 4 years, so it's not like it's something that came up overnight. But I don't think it doesn't seem like they're in a rush to
Okay.
adopt it. So I think if we got something to them this month, it's fine. Because I don't think they're gonna adopt it before.
So we have runway to add more.
Yes. And I think, again, as a master plan, you just need to have some general language that gives them the kind of points in an overall direction. It's not, you don't have to have it all worked out in specific.
And who writes that language? Is it the Director of Economic Development? or
No, I
the
do
Director of
not.
Planning?
This would be a culmination, the consultant drafted it based on what he heard from, but the commission has to eventually adopt it, so they have to. So whatever changes they want to make to the language, is what they're gonna do.
Gotcha. So they're coming up also, the consultant with the enactable language.
Yeah, there'll be a whole second phase where they, first, they're in the process of rewriting our zoning regulations just to modernize it, to take the existing, and then there's a whole second phase of that to look at some of the policies that are in the plan and implementing those in terms of language that would go through its own process in terms of.
Gotcha, so a few more steps until enactability.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
do we have a sense of how receptive they might be to this kind of feedback?
I think they're very receptive to hearing from us. I don't know, again, I think their thinking is there's limited opportunities to upzone from residential to commercial. I think Kings Highway, you can almost make an argument because it's kind of a mixed setting currently. That might be the exception to the rule, but there is some language in the existing plan that talks about, the commercial land is largely what it is. They don't see, most of the commercial development would be a result of redevelopment or adaptive reuse or infill as opposed to rezoning areas for commercial use. So I don't think what we're proposing here is again, that radical. So I think eliminating split zones makes a lot of sense on multiple levels, and then looking at our parking requirements. I know the commission and staff have talked about that. They acknowledge that our parking regulations are excessive. And then, in terms of widening the commercial corridor, I do think that there are opportunities to do that. So, yeah, thank you, Mark. All right. Economic development. So, Ken, I'll just set this up. Ken has, we've been talking for a while in terms of how to orient or animate the commission's work, and had put together this proposal just, for our discussion.
I love being here. I love being a part of this. I would love to, for myself and all of us, to dig really deeper into this and be much more of an actionable committee rather than a consulting committee, and help Mark, help him achieve our goals, kind of be an employable workforce as much as we can, to devote time and attention. And also to have an agenda of activities and projects that satisfy the town goals. Help Mark drive these home, satisfy our goals and wants. So I came up with some project list that we could all kind of take on, whether we do it a few at a time, whether we concentrate on one. It requires most, time, effort, as much as we can. Maybe it requires extracurricular work. Maybe it requires research, writing, tours, whatever it might do. I'm committed. I'd love to be part of, more of a deeper dive into creating these strategies, helping Mark create policies that are enactable and within the new plan guidelines. I came up with 6 things. Love your input. I think anyone would like to do?
No, it's supporting Mark, I think, is top of the list, and I think a lot of these things are probably covered in what he's doing. So it is identifying like what is actionable that we can do.
That's correct. Like, what do we do? How do we?
I think that's why we're
all
all here, and I think it's good to put together a concrete list of items to focus on.
Correct. So for number 1, advocate for upzoning, rezoning, select parcels. We already talked about what we would love to do with Kings Highway. Maybe we even expand the scope to include Kings Highway from end to end. Maybe we include some, Black Rock Turnpike in there. Maybe we include some Boston Post Road. So if we want to expand the scope, how do we help Mark expand the scope? His labor or staff is limited. How can we add some manpower to that? Not sure how. You have to kind of, task us, but
Does it help to?
I'm ready, willing, and able.
Does it help to be more participate more and be vocal at like TVZ meetings?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And when we look at, so back up, I know we've talked about the overall mission objective here, and there's been conversation about increasing the grand list and commercial grand list. And that's no doubt important because, 93% of the town's revenues come from property taxes. And in terms of our grand list, 12.5% come from commercial applications, commercial uses. And so are there ways in which we can increase that percentage? And it was noted in the master plan and other documents that's a little less than what the average is for many communities in terms of the share of the grant list being commercial versus residential. But we also recognize that, as we've talked about, only 4.5% of our land use is zoned for commercial uses. So that's why looking at, where there's opportunities to widen that commercial corridor, provide for more opportunities for redevelopment, that makes sense. So it's consistent with some of the things we just talked about. But that's not all that we do. And so some of this may take a long time. We certainly looked at, how can we increase, can we goose demand? But, Fairfield doesn't exist in a vacuum. Our office market, our commercial marketplace is relatively small, but it exists as part of a larger commercial marketplace. So it's kind of hard to envision that you're going to be able to gin up a lot of demand for new commercial office space. Fairfield specific when we're part of a larger office market, which has, pretty high vacancy rates right now. So there's a lot of product out there. So you can, unless you have somebody that specifically wants to be in Fairfield because maybe they live here and they don't want to have to commute any distance, like the C-suite executives. We have jokingly at one point said, maybe our objective should be to convince C-suite executives to move to Fairfield, they and their spouses, because maybe they'll move their companies
It's actually a good strategy.
subsequently. So
If there's real
so
estate.
that's something we've talked about, but all these things are like long-term plays. I mean, they take a long time to actually move the needle. If your objective, your measurable objective is increase the grand list, it takes a long time to come to fruition. But there are other things here that, one of the things that Kenny's mentioned is talking about leverageable, monetizable opportunities. We have looked at our town assets, maybe not as holistically or comprehensively as we should. And we periodically get, unsolicited offers, but there's no plan. And so maybe we should take a closer look at some of these things, like the Mill Plain parking lot. One of the challenges for that parking lot, it obviously has no need for parking.
And there's traffic 24/7.
But the issue is traffic, and we have a major bottleneck there where Mill Plain crosses underneath the railroad underpass, and then you have that god awful 5-legged intersection, which is probably the worst performing intersection in town. So there is a resiliency study underway, looking at all the underpasses from a climate change perspective and ways in which we can make them safer and more resilient to impacts of these major rainstorm events that we seem to have with more frequency. But part of that may be just looking at the infrastructure there and whether it should be widened to provide more stacking capacity, maybe changing that intersection. These are big projects. It's going to take a long time, but we have to start somewhere. We have to identify the problem and then start working on ways in which we can address it. So to go back to like town assets, it's talked about like the train station, the Mill Plain auxiliary lot, the rec department, if we ever acquired the Turner Reserve Center, which is a recommendation here, consummate the acquisition of the Turner Reserve Center, which can only be used for recreational use. So maybe the rec department moves over to the Turner Reserve Center site, and then we have a development site. What's the use? So, and how are we addressing, the impacts of how we're mitigating the impacts of any proposed development down the road. So I think just maybe the commission could be looking at those opportunities and we can start strategizing about ways in which we can plan, develop a plan for it. Maybe it's working with doing a highest and best use analysis, doing a market analysis, working with the neighborhoods to come up with a concept plan that is reflective of both town's needs as well as, that would fit into the neighborhood too. So I think there is certainly a lot of opportunities here. That you
I was just, we're not gonna be able to go out and recruit businesses individually and that sort of, I mean, that's harder to do and a much more sustained effort, but things like, the Handy and Harmon property, like that has been sitting, waiting for remediation. Like, can we as a group start to try and apply pressure, like just start writing letters to the editor or whatever it may be? It's been on the remediation list, I think we've been talking about for years here, and one that just sits, but like, again, to these specific points, like, all right, identify all the things you just talked through and trying to fix that, like starting to put some pressure on it. I don't know if we create a Facebook group where we could start to recruit people like, hey, moving Fairfield forward and try and be, politically benign and just try and give people the opportunity to commit. But I mean, I think those are things we can do to support what you're doing.
Yep.
And then, but also actionable as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good example because you could create a whole campaign that would, bring awareness to the issue and apply pressure to regulatory agencies and others to move forward with remediation of the site so it can be redeveloped.
Right.
And it's not just a one-off, but you need to come up with an overall plan and then be able to execute on that. So it's not just, we sent a letter, which is what we've been doing. We sent a letter to DEP and get the commissioner's attention for a bit. She has a meeting, passes off to her staff, and then another year goes by. So it's gotta be some sustained effort. And a good example of how this commission can do something like that is with regard to the community theater. There was a commission member who felt very strongly about the community theater. Now, maybe he was at the time went off in some not so helpful directions, but overall, he was very instrumental in at least building some momentum. It wasn't in the end, I don't think it was decisive in terms of getting us there, but it certainly did play a role. So I do think, something like that could work.
Yeah, having an owner of a certain task, it's helpful. That's part of what we should think of as a committee. What tasks are important to us, which can we do quicker, which are more long-term, which will give us, a single, which will give us a double, a triple, a home run. Who's the champion of this particular one? What information, research, background, documentation needs to go into it? But it's just to kind of get us started on this. What I forgot to put down is parking. I think parking's a low-hanging fruit and relatively simple. And all we do is have to devote some time and energy resources to help Mark, however he wants to,
And you have a couple groups that might be also advocates and you can join forces with. The Affordable Housing Committee's looked at it. They produced a plan, which I shared with you, or at least an analysis of parking capacity and usage. I'm sure that some of the other groups may also be inclined, like people that are concerned about sustainability. Does it really help to have, large unused asphalt parking lots? I mean, it would be better if that were green space and may help with recharge and not putting so much water into the storm drainage system. So there's a lot of potential benefits there, but I do think it's again something that commission and staff have talked about, meaning planning and zoning. But I think part of what we do is be a catalyst for that change and keep pushing, like we did with the outdoor dining.
Right.
So that might be
We're talking about downtown.
parking.
Yes, right.
There's a lot of, I think parking generally we should look at, but what really brought it to the fore and what may be of most interest to this commission is our parking requirements for large multi-tenanted commercial properties. And because what happens is we allocate or require parking based on use at a certain number of parking spaces based on the square footage of, as determined by use. And there's no cutoff. So BJ's, for example, is actually, believe it or not, short of parking. Now, I don't know how that could possibly be,
Doing that
based
from that
on,
garage.
they do, but they're still short of parking because you're taking a giant building and you're saying all that building has to be assigned a use. And that use has a parking requirement associated with it. So if it's if it's retail, 150,000 square feet of retail, that's where it becomes obscene. That's why you have situations like the Bob's Plaza or Fairfield Center. Now, I can't call it Bob's Plaza anymore, but Fairfield Center Shopping Plaza. You have large parking lots because you're taking all that, assigning it a retail use, and you're saying, well, I need, X number of parking spaces per thousand. And there, at some point, we don't need to make more.
Right.
Because there's,
I love
Shared.
Bob's as an example of that, because that is an opportunity waiting to happen, and because of the way the codes are written, it's not modern. It doesn't take into account the modern ways of shopping. I love
the
that.
fact that there's shared parking, it doesn't reflect, it's not like everyone comes there and, it's, they're stopping there and they're doing multiple trips between the various stores there potentially, so. But I think we can all agree that there's a lot of examples like that, many examples in town, so it's something we've talked about, the planning and zoning has talked about, but we still don't have a text amendment to change it.
Due to like a Bob's, like the Mill Plain Road, I could see because that doesn't need to be a parking lot. Right. That could be completely something else, but with the Bob's, what would you, for current use, what would be an example of what you could do?
A lot of things.
Well, they could
Add in the front.
Yeah.
They could do that.
Pads up
Like
front,
green, kind of,
Restaurant or something, a pad up front.
stores up front.
Yeah.
You could do stores up front,
Got it.
so it continues the street wall, continues the continuity, it
Got it.
hides Bob's, which is ugly from, there's
Got
a
it.
beautification, there's an economic development, there's a continuation of, our downtown further.
okay,
It could be housing, part of it could be housing to satisfy some,
If they would create a second story.
There's-
Yeah, it
Right.
could go up.
all it is a lost opportunity
got it.
because of the way the codes are written.
Okay.
So what we want to do is kind of, enforce a modernization, relooking at that, which unlocks a lot of opportunity to satisfy whatever goals.
The Sherman Greens parking lot could be a parking deck.
Right, yeah, the deck would be nice
Right.
there.
You get at least, you get double it.
You could double it.
Maybe you go down, you never know, you have like half
It's a
down.
water-
and
it's a
half
water
up.
issue.
Yeah, so-
There's a water, they put the filtration system in the front and it can't keep up.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can really go down.
Yeah.
But, you go up, you go through, I mean, if, it wouldn't, 3 stories parking would probably be the same height as the police station. If you wanna look at it that way.
Right.
Great ideas.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know.
Bring you
No.
come out, you take the.
Or if Sherman Greens, you don't wanna do that at Sherman Green, you do have the train station where you might be able to work within the existing topography and you could lose a couple stories without really altering much.
Right.
Cause you got the cliff on the one side, so I know that's.
Right, so now we expanded scope from, how does it help our businesses? How does it help our landowners? Now it's how do we kind of change mobility in downtowns?
Yeah.
I love, we can expand the scope as in any direction we go, and I love it, and, so and what we kind of need is a champion of each individual item. Someone to kind of take ownership of a particular policy desire, like parking. If someone wants to be, kind of own the parking. And, do the, some of the heavy lifting with others involved, but kind of be the champion, whether you're, the brand ambassador of it, you're the most vocal person of it, you're leading the team, would love someone to
The other
kind
thing I
of
was,
do that kind
my
of.
caution would be, and I think if we can focus on 1 or 2 things, it's
Yeah.
better than try to spread ourselves too thin.
So I might suggest we pick, if we want to use the parking concept, we pick a location. We pick a location that's, you know, what we think is a home run location, and we hammer on that. We figure out together how we can hammer on it, how each of us can have something positive behind it. So, so might I suggest that we think about it at our next meeting to decide, everyone come forward with a location that they want to focus on for parking. And we pick a parking space, a parking location that we want to try to expand on, that we believe will have the most impact. And let's figure out a forward movement on that.
What I think we could do is, I mean, you could develop a playbook from there, and then we could just iterate and try. Trial and error, like this worked, this didn't work, like we have, I mean, I've had plenty of ideas that work, like I think this is gonna be brilliant, and you get halfway through and you're like, this is not, you gotta pivot, so.
Okay.
But then we could, you know, get through one, and so like, these three things were great, we shouldn't spend any time doing this, and then we can maybe sort of flywheel, like it's faster and easier to do, we could start just putting things into a system.
And in addition, we should understand the parking code inside and out ourselves. We should become masters of the code and understand it. We should come up what we think are kind of these market failures. Bob's parking lot is a market failure. To me, a failure of the parking code is bodega. My guess is bodega cannot take a space next door to them, because then they would be overparked. They
Yeah,
could, right?
he was, he needed a variance. And
Correct. I think that's a failure in the code, considering the nature of the center itself is not a lot of traffic producing retailers.
Especially at night when people are eating.
Actually, not. So that's another one to me.
I do my dry cleaner at night.
And just to explore, and we may be going down the dead end on that. But I think that's where it fails. And it personally impacts me because I want to go to bodega at 8:30 and be sat instead of waiting. And it impacts their revenue because they can't double their revenue. So they're constrained to, you know, $2 million a year instead of $4 million a year by doubling their space because of the constraints. A third one to me is Organica.
Yes, down towards Southport.
Right, great, right? You can't sit there.
Difficult though, yeah.
Well,
Well, from day one, that was an
Well,
issue.
they designed it that way because of parking restrictions.
Yeah.
You couldn't really have seats. They have
Get out.
countertops, right?
right.
Yeah, it's to
They're a
go.
great place. They're constrained. Why? Is there something that can be changed that allows them to put seats there, allows them to thrive, satisfies their client, creates a better guest experience?
You desire that.
What's that?
So I'm
Desire that.
I'm gonna ask us
I don't think they wanted that.
I'm gonna ask us to table the rest of this discussion if we could, and let's pick this up again next.
Homework, maybe read the parking regulations.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. Does the town own Bob's
No,
property?
No.
So it's the landlord. So if we had ideas and looking at assets and
it's hard for us to look, I mean, it's good to have examples, but we have to look at things as similarly situated properties. So you're looking at regulations that affect multiple properties potentially. So you have to be able to consider what the impacts are.
and can you announce who is coming into Bob's? Because I heard one mention and I thought, oh my gosh, that's going to change the whole profile. And I think future upgrade that entire shopping center maybe.
Until anything's done, it's not done.
Okay, all right. So no
You
formal
You
announcements.
can make, people can speculate all they want.
Well, that's
Lease is
true.
actually signed, it's not done.
Mark, do you have any,
Bob's is-
Actually, I'd like to,
No, it's on the corner of Post and Beach.
Oh, really? They're not going.
give her a second.
Ooh.
Beach.
Oh,
One thing I'll mention in your,
No, I heard who's coming into Bob's, that's all.
I just really following at home, but, I just wanted to provide a quick update on our marketing assistance grant activity. So you'll recall, a few months ago,
Trying to, they've been
the
trying. for-
commission authorized reallocation of funds under our 19 assistance for marketing, micro businesses. We've had 7 applications to date, so not a lot of activity. I just got an 8 this morning. So we've only committed $3,100, of which we've spent $1,350 to date, so there's quite a bit left. We'll play this out probably through the end of the year and then see if we want to pivot and do something different. But I wanted to just give a quick update as to where we are. And again, if you know of businesses that might be in need of marketing assistance to help them recapture market share, reach new customers because of the impacts of the pandemic, directly or indirectly, you know, they don't have to make it that much of a connection, but just let me know and feel free to pass along a referral. That'd be great. So we're just trying to get the word out to some folks, but it hasn't been as robust as we would have liked, but we'll keep trying.
Good. Yeah, Beverly, do you want to bring us up to speed?
Just quickly, yes, we have a big community event coming up on the 14th of October, which is our Fairfield Harvest Market. Yes, it is right on the back of this, along with Mike Jaley's at the very, very end of the month. We are sold out. We have, I think, 80 vendors. We've got a wait list, it's gigantic. And speaking of gigantic, we do have our giant pumpkin, the biggest ever from this farmer. So kids come down and they guess the weight of it. And we have our Halloween costume dog parade being held at noon. We have a ton of trucks. And then we're working with Fairfield Rotary, who down behind the museum is the beer garden. And I believe we have a band, right? Do we have a band coming in with that? So this is gigantic, and I have since found out that Sherman School is having their harvest market. So that was like a parking thing. So, and then Sea Grape is having a big event on the same day. So it's going to be busy, busy, busy downtown with lots of traffic. And, but anyway, it's one of our, favorite community events, and we've got lots of nice vendors and produce and pumpkins and bread and all that good stuff. So, and Rotary is part of that as well.
Is the Sea Grape a town event or is it a Fairfield?
No, it's private.
It's private, but the connection is to Fairfield View. I just met with them yesterday. I think the students dress up in Halloween
Yeah.
costumes, but there will be a lot of traffic on that end.
Yes.
Nice part about that is they all have to go past you.
Yes, right, exactly. There's gonna be a busy day.
All right, Mark, any updates?
The only other thing I'll mention is Restaurant Week, 23rd.
Yeah.
of November. Thank you,
Great.
Fairfield U, sponsor for our event. We have
Yay,
26
love
restaurants
Fairfield U.
participating this year.
How many?
26.
Oh, great.
So, we're working on promoting that, and then we did have our first ever Oktoberfest.
Oh, how did that go? I wasn't even here that
Yeah,
weekend.
despite the rain, we had over 1,000 people there.
Excellent.
Good
Impressive.
turnout.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first Black woman, and was very pleased with that event. I think FDC was very happy, as were most, as were all the vendors.
So I think rain helped her.
We're gonna be doing it again next year, for sure.
Rain helped that, or maybe?
Well, we think we would have had probably 2 to 3 times that number easily if the weather would have been.
I bet, yeah, more pleasant.
Yeah, we did have to cancel the axe throwing because of the rain and some of the other outdoor activities we had. So the music went inside, which is why we chose FTC. But we had a really good turnout, and so I guess we're going to be doing it again next year.
That is fantastic.
That's great. It's a good town event for sure.
Anything else, Mark?
In the interest of time, no.
Okay, all right.
Happy
Any
to
other-
answer any questions.
Any other business, Jennifer, do you want to do anything with the university?
We'll mention with Fairfield U, we're doing the Meet the Stags event as part of.
Oh, yeah. October 24th, we're doing a Meet the Stags event downtown by the gazebo. We did this last year. It's with the women's team, and you can meet the players, and we've got a food truck coming down and activities geared toward families. It's the 24th on the green.
And Sherman.
Anyone else?
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Motion to,
Motion to adjourn.
motion adjourned, second.
Okay. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.